Hello everybody, I'm Godot and today we're gonna make this crazy FPS controller for a zombie shooter in Godot. Okay, so let's start by getting the guns, and I'm going to use this little asset from each.io, which you can find in the description. Then in your project, go over and click on the res folder right here. Then inside of the guns folder, go over to the normal version and color, and then open it, and we are going to use the GLB folder, so just import it like this. And after it's done importing everything, you can just go over and optionally change the name to weapons, and it will import again. Then we'll get our crosshairs from this little aspect from itch.io too, which you can find in the description. And here I'm going to go over to the white folder and import only the 512 folder like this into a project. And again, you can right click and rename it to crosshairs like that. And then for the gun sounds, we're going to download this little asset pack from itch.io too, which again you can find in the description. And before we import it, we are going to right click here and create a new folder and call it sounds, and then click on it. Then inside of the gun sounds folder, I'm going to choose gun MT5, gunshot 16, then reload 2, 7, 11, 12, and 13, all from the OGG format. And you can also choose many other variations if you want. I just don't want too many, and I think these ones are really good. And before we start making the player, I want to make a little fix right here, because as you can see, if we just save the scene for a second, then it will take quite a long time like this, and we don't want that. And it happens because we made the entire map local, and this is a pretty big map, so it was a pretty bad decision. And instead what we'll do is go over and open the static body right here, and then search for collision right here, and just go over and shift select all of the collision shapes only inside of the gas station and not in the borders, and then just Control X and cut them, then clear the search, and just go over and select all of the meshes inside of the gas station and delete them. Then click on the gas station again and paste all of the collision shapes that you copied, and then click on the gas station and just put the gas station.fbx right under it. And now if you save the game, then it will be much quicker like that. And another thing is the fact that all of the doors in the game are completely closed. So let's go over and enable editable children, and then click right here on the door, and we'll just open it like this. Doesn't have to be too accurate, but you don't want it inside of things. So about that. Can't really see the collision, so let's go over and enable gizmos. And the door isn't quite where the collision is, so let's go over and move it a bit. By the way, last video I used only the convex collision shapes, as you can see, but sometimes you can actually just use a box collision, which will be much more performant. As you can see right here, it will be pretty accurate too. But it's pretty much a hassle to just add it to every single mesh, and there are many meshes right here. But if you really want the performance, then you can do it, but just know that it's not that big of a deal. Then let's go over and open all of the other doors. And this is another door. And right there, let's open up the bathroom stall. And just like that, we are done with all of the fixes. And now we can go over and actually make the player. So let's go up and just close all of this. And then save. And then let's go over and create a new scene. And this is gonna be an other node scene. And we're going to use a character body 3D like this. Then let's call it player. Then right click and make a node, and this is gonna be a collision shape. And we're going to use a capsule shape like this. Then open it up and set the radius to 0.4 and the height to 1.6. And then in the transform in the Y, set it to 0.8. Then go over and make a new node. And this is gonna be called a camera holder, and we are going to go over and position it on 1.5 on the Y, and then under it we're gonna make the actual camera. Then go over and make another node inside of it, and this is gonna be the weapons holder. Then under the camera, right click and make a new raycast. Set the position on the Y to 0 and on the Z to -100. Then right click again on the camera and make a new canvas layer. And then in 2D view, create another control node inside of it right here and expand it to the entire screen. Then call it HUD like this. And then right click and add a label under it. And we are going to call this ammo. Let's set the text to something like 30 by 30. And we are going to put it on the right side right here. So let's align it to there. And then align the horizontal alignment to the right side. Then it's also add label settings and set the font size to be something like 30. And then let's go down and in the layout, in the transform, set the position to 10 on Y and -10 on the X, maybe another -5. And this is how it looks. Then save for a second and that's it. Then in the weapons folder, right click on the AK-47 model and make a new inherited scene. And right there, go over and select all of the meshes. And then in the surface material override, click here and create a new shader material and expand it. And before we make the shader, right click on the AK-47 and make a new GPU particle right here. Then go over to side view and position it right there at the tip of the gun. You can go over and make it as accurate as you want. And we are going to call this muzzle. And then back on the mesh material, go over and make a new shader right here. We are going to call this gun shader. Then click on the shader and it will open up the shader editor right here. And before we actually make the shader, go over into the project settings and in the globals, in the shader globals, create a new variable and this is going to be called view model underscore FOV and set the type right here to be a float and then add it and set the default one to be 50 and then you can close and back in the shader, select everything and paste this code which you can find in the description. And I'm not going to explain it because it's not the code that I actually made, but I will link right now the original video that was about this code. And what it basically does is that if we get back into the normal view after we save the shader, okay, so then save the shader, and as you can see, the gun is really weird like that, okay? Like as you can see, it's actually there, but the mesh is there. And this is because it completely changes the FOV. And this is just to fix a little issue that is called gun clipping, and it happens when you play an FPS game, and let's say you go into the world and you go over and you're really close to the wall, then you see like the wall is clipping through the camera. Then the gun can also just get right inside of the wall like that. So let's go over and grab the gun. And as you can see, sometimes you might just go over and the gun will just be half inside of a wall, and we don't really want that. Instead, what we want is to just always have the gun in front of everything, and we don't do it in a simple way because then things like shadows and all of that won't work. But you can trust me that this shader works absolutely great and it doesn't have any problems. And you can even really easily adjust the settings on the gun on like how big it is with the FOV, which is the one that we made right here in the project settings. As you can see right now it's here. And if I change the FOV to be like 80, then it's really small like that. So this is what the FOV does. You can also just edit it yourself inside of the game and see the result that you actually like. But for now, we'll just close it. And right now it's completely white, so let's go over to the shader parameters. And right here you have many parameters, but we'll just go over. And right here, let's take the albedo material right here and put it in the albedo. And then also the normal map right there. And as you can see, we have this really nice gun model like that. Then for the muzzle, click on it, and right here in the draw passes, we are going to make in the first pass a quad mesh right here. This is just a plane that is faced to the side like this. And then inside of it, we'll go over and make a new shader material, and then go over into material and create a new shader. And this is gonna be called muzzle shader, and then open it up. And then again, just select everything and paste this code. And this is really similar to the original code that is in the gun shader, but this time you can see the render mode is a bit different right here. Instead of mix, it's on add mode. And also down here you can see this entire part right there. All of these lines aren't actually in the original shader, and this is to make it work with particles like the muzzle flash. And you don't really have to know anything about that. I just paste it from the original particle code and that's it. And for now, we'll just close it. Then you don't have to configure anything on it for now. Then go over to the process material and make a new particle process material right here. And it will already start doing some weird things. Then go over to the time and set explosiveness to 1. And then they will all spawn at the same time. Then go over and set the lifetime to something really low, like 0.05. And then down in the process material, expand it. And right here, we don't have to do much. Just go over to the accelerators and in the gravity, set the Y to 0. Then in the spawn, go to the velocity and set the direction on the X to 0. And go to the angle and set the minimum to something like -70 and the max to 70. Something like that should be good, and it will just rotate around like that. And the thing I forgot to do in the material is right there, expand, and go to the shader material. And right there in the texture albedo, go over and make a new gradient texture 2D. Then expand it. And in the fill, set the fill type to radial. And then do it from 0.5 on both axes. And then in the gradient, go to interpolation and set the mode to cubic. Then go over and right there on the gradient, we'll just switch the positions like this, right there. And then on this one, go to it and go to the raw. Then set the B to 0, the R to 2, and the green to 1.4. Then it will have this little glowing yellow thing. And then you can close it. And the field should actually be square. And now we'll have this little shining star effect like that. And the last thing we need to do is right there, set the specular, metallic, and roughness all to 0. And also set the size to 0.05 on both axes right here in the mesh. And as you can see, we have this really nice muzzle flash effect that will also follow the FOV of the gun. Then go over and add the gun empty sound. And for this gun, I'm going to use reload sound number 2. Then go over and rename the weapon back to AK-47 and add a script to it. And this is gonna be called gun. And after we select everything and paste this little code which I made, most of you will already realize the fact that this is pretty much exactly the same as the third person gun that I made in the GTA series. And it's pretty close, apart from the fact that there are some more variables, as you can see right here, for things like the recoil and camera shake and look sensitivity and a bunch of things. And we can currently see them because we have a little problem right there. Let's go. And this is because they call the sound folder sounds and not sound. So let's just fix it in a second. And now we save, everything is fine. And as you can see, even after renaming the sound folder, it doesn't work because we don't have the bullet hole scene. So let's go for a second and make a new scene. And this is going to be another node type of type decal like this. Then back in the 3D scene. And this is the bullet hole that we are going to use for the actual image. So just download it right here. And of course, you can find this in the description. And after you import it into your project right here, go over to the texture and just put it inside of the albedo like this. And we're also going to set the size to 0.1 on all axes. And let's also go over and rename it to bullet hole. And let's just give a second to explain what it actually does after we save it. So back in the Word, let's go over and put the bullet hole scene right there. And as you can see, it just puts the actual image on the mesh like this. And you could just use a normal texture 3D if you want, but this is pretty nice because if you go over and put it on like a ledge like this, if you go over and put it like this and also angle the surface a little bit And let's just disable gizmos right here so we can actually see it. Then you can see that it's actually adjusting to the surface that it's on. So sort of like projects the texture onto the surface. And this is really good for bullet holes like this. And for now, let's just save and get back into the gun. And right there, the script should work right now. So let's just make a little change, and right there, now it works. And we can save. And now back on the gun, we won't be able to see all of the variables right now, and we might be able to see them after we click right here on the scene and reload the saved scene. And yeah, right there, all of the variables. And you can very much just adjust them to every single weapon you want. And I won't really explain much of what everything here does, because I already explained how it works inside of the GTA series. So if you want, I'll have it linked down in the description. And the main difference right here is the fact that, let's go down, and right there you can see I actually instantiate the bullet hole and place it over in the scene and all of that. And this is all instead of the traces. So back then we had like a trace effect for all of the shots, and this time we're actually just having the muzzle effect and then the bullet hole in the end, because traces don't really make sense in FPS games. And right there, we just make the bullet hole and make it face to the actual direction that we hit. And then we call the destroy bullet hole function, which if we go down, you can see exactly like the trace. It just takes it, and after the bullet hole time, it will just delete the actual bullet holes so we don't have a bunch of bullet holes over the scene. And then the sound and reload and stop and start shooting functions, all of that are exactly the same. But this time you can see I have this little update ammo function. And this is because in this series we won't have like a UI script on the canvas layer, because we only have one player and we don't transition over to a car. And instead all of the code will be inside of the guns and the player. So right there you can see I just straight up call to the ammo right here. You can see from the camera, then the canvas layer, and the HUD and the ammo, and just set the text to the actual amount in the gun itself. And yeah, this is all pretty simple. But this time I also added a little adjustment, and that's the fact that now we'll have a little pump animation, which you can optionally add, and it will be really good for like um, non-automatic weapons. So we're going to touch them a bit later when we get to the shotgun. But for now, let's just go over back to the player, and right there in the weapons holder, just click and add the AK-47 scene. And then back in the 3D view, we can go over and actually start adjusting the weapon position. And as you can see, the muzzle flash is currently going because we need to go back, and in the muzzle flash, enable right here one shot and then it will stop. So let's save again and get back to the scene. And now we'll need to actually position the gun. And the first step is to rotate it to the right direction. So let's go down and enter transform, set the rotation on the Y to 90. And the position I like is 0 0.1 on the X, minus 0 0.1 on the Y, and minus 0 0.2 on the Z. And you can very easily just go over and click on the camera and preview it. And then back on the AK-47, just go over and make all of your changes like this, and it will work just like that. But as you can see, we're kinda having some weird issues inside of the gun, and that's because we need to go over to the camera and actually set the near variable right here all the way down to 0, and now it will be fine. Then click back on the gun, and as you can see, the position and everything is fine, but this time we also have an option to aim the gun. So let's go over and try to get some kind of aim position. In this case, it will just be always 0 on the X because we want him in the center. And the Z is usually the same. Just go over and set the Y to something a bit higher like this. Yeah, minus 0.07. And after we're happy with it, just right click and copy the value, and then just paste it right here on the aim pose, and it will be fine. And then just set back all of the original variables that you have on the position. And as you can see, we have many variables right here, but we won't actually adjust them from here. Instead, we'll go over to the weapon and then click on it and adjust it here. So we won't have the original scene and other values inside of the player, but you can also do it just there. And for this gun, I want it to be pretty accurate. So let's set the spread to 0.5. Then reload time of 3 seconds is pretty good. And I pretty much like all of the other settings because they are very much adjusted already for some kind of assault rifle like this. So let's just save. And then back on the player, we'll probably want some other guns, but before that, we want to also add the crosshairs. So right click on the HUD and make a child control node inside of it, and then center it to the screen. And we'll go over and call it crosshairs. Then right click on it, then go up into the crosshairs folder, and right there you'll have all of the crosshairs. And you can very easily view them by just clicking on the first one and then clicking on space, and you will see it right here on the side. And after you click back on them, you can just go up and down with the arrows, and then just always press space on the ones that you actually want. Now for the AK-47, I really like crosshair number 3. So just right click on the crosshairs and make a new texture rect like this. And you can also call it by the name of the gun, but it doesn't really matter. We only need it to be aligned at the same order. And then just drag over the texture right here. And also make sure to align it to the center. Then in the expand mode, go over and select ignore size, and then go to the layout, and in the transform we'll set the size to something lower. In this case I just divided it by 8 to 64 by 64 like this, and I really think that this is a good size. Then let's just also go over and duplicate it again, this time for the shotgun. And for the shotgun I'm going to use crosshair number 23. Then duplicate again, and for the Mac 10 I like to use crosshair number 19, so go over and drag it. And then duplicate again, and this is going to be the PW. And for this one I really like number 34, so drag it over. And I'll just also select all of them. And in the visibility, I'll set the self-modulate on all of them on the alpha to 0.5 like this, because I do want them to be slightly invisible, but you can also modulate them whatever you want. And for now, we'll just save. And then let's go over and make all of the other weapons. And then let's go down, and right there in the weapons, go ahead and find the shotgun. And again, just make a new inherited scene, fix the name, select all of the meshes, then expand the surface material override and go down. And this time we'll just drag the shader material right there, then expand it, shader parameters, and just drag over the corresponding textures. So right there, let's put the albedo and the normal like that, and we already have some really nice textures. Then go over to the AK-47 scene and copy the muzzle and the gun empty sound, and then back in the shotgun, click on it and paste. Then select the muzzle. But as you can see, if we get back into side view, we can't really quite adjust the actual position, because if we try to zoom in and out, it kind of moves like that. So let's go over and disable the material on the muzzle, and then also reset the surface material override right there on the gun. Then go over and grab the muzzle and just try to adjust the position right there. Then go to the transform and copy the position. And now we can go back a couple of times until everything is fine. And as you can see, the material is back there and everything moves weird. Also on the muzzle. And then go over and just paste the position, and now everything is fine, even though it looks really weird like that. And then go up, and right there for the sound here, I actually chose to use reload sound number 7. And the reason for it is because if you just play it for a second, not here, right there, I'm pretty sure we heard that it's pretty short. So I'm actually going to use this one, and this is especially for the reload animation of this gun, because this time we're actually going to right click on the shotgun and also make an animation player, then make a new animation inside of it and call it pump with a capital P. Then set the length to something like 0.5 and just zoom in a little bit. Then just go over and select the shotgun pump right here. Then go to the position and keyframe it. Then go to frame right here on like about 0.5 and just drag it back like this. Then keyframe again. Then go to the end and click on this key and just Control D to duplicate it here. And also set the animation type to cubic. And now if you play, then you'll see a little animation like that. So it's just a pump animation. And it does leave a little weird mark right there, as you can see on the mesh, but it's not all that noticeable and I don't even know how to fix it. I'm pretty sure it's something with the texture. And this animation is probably pretty slow, so let's go over into the animation player and set the speed scale to 1.5 like that, and now it will be a little faster. And then, like we said, this is going to be a non-automatic weapon, so on the shotgun itself, we'll need to go over and load the actual script. So this is going to be the gun script, and this one is going to be non-automatic. And for the bullet count, I'm going to do something like 5. This is the amount of bullets I want in every single shot. And I'll give him something around 8 shots. Then let's go over and give it a little quicker reload time, something like 2. Then set the spread to something like 5 because we want it to be not accurate. Then let's just increase the recoil on every single axis on both normal and aim mode. So I think this is pretty good. Then set the camera shake to something like 0.4. And I'll also up the normal speed to something like 4.5 and the aim speed to 2.5. Or maybe 4 is actually enough for the normal speed. Then we'll need to set the aim pose, and in order to do that, we need to save the scene and then go to the player and on the weapons holder, just click and then select the shotgun and put it under the weapons holder like this. And for now, we'll just hide the AK-47. Then already on the camera view, go down and in the transform, set the rotation to 90. And this time you'll probably want to start with the aim pose. And I found that minus 0.17 on the Z and minus 0.07 on the Y is pretty good for me. So let's just copy it for a second and put it in the aim. And then just set the Y to minus 0.1 and the X to 0.1. And this is also pretty good position. So we just put it as the normal position. The next up is the Mach 10. So let's go up and right there, a new inherited scene. And you already know, just fix the name. And this time, before we actually correct the material, let's go to the side view and just copy the muzzle and the gun empty right there and paste it here. And instead of copying the position, let's just go over to the drop passes. And right there, let's just copy the material and then reset it. Then let's go over and position it correctly at the tip of the gun. And now we just paste the material and that looks pretty good. Then select all of the meshes and just make another overlay material. Just drag the gun shader and then again in the shader parameters, just go over and set all of the textures and we've got another model complete. So let's just save it right there. Then go up. And just a little thing I forgot about the sound. For the gun empty on all of the guns, make sure to remove the actual number right there. And specifically for the guns that you can pump, make sure to set the pump sound to pump. And the actual reload sound for the shotgun is reload number 13 right here. And make sure to call the reload sound only reload. And then on the shotgun, go over to the animation player and we need to add another track. And this is going to be a method track. And it's going to be on the pump sound right here. And then right click and insert the key. And the key is going to be the void play right there. And now we can finally save. Then back on the Mac 10, you'll want to use reload sound number 7. And again, correct the name and just save. And then back on the actual weapon, go over and load the script like last time. This one is gonna be automatic too, but let's set the max size to 40. Then the fire rate to something lower like 0.05, the damage to something lower like 10, and I leave the spread on 1. Then let's also make the reload time quicker. I think that 1.5 will be pretty crazy. Then let's set the camera shake to 0.2, the normal speed to 4.5, and the aim speed to 2.5, and I leave everything else on default, maybe 3 on the aim speed. And again, just save, go over to the player, drag the gun, hide the shotgun, and then in the transform, rotate to 90 degrees. And I found that minus 0.04 on the Y and minus 0.15 on the Z is pretty good position. And again, just copy it and put it in the aim pose. And then for the actual position, put it on 0.1 on the X, maybe 0.125, and then correct the Y to be on minus 0.05, and this is pretty good position. And again, you can just save. And one last thing is the height offset. And this is the actual height in which the gun will reload. And the way in which we kind of reload guns in the game is just, let's go over and just lower the position of the Y like this. You see, before it was 0.05, so minus 0.1, like this, so minus 0.15, and now it's right down there, and we can see it, and it will reload there. But if you go over and show the shotgun, then you can see if I put it on minus 0.2, then we can kind of still see it. And I actually want to sort of see the gun. So let's get back into the Mach 10 after we hide the shotgun. And for this one, we'll just go over and set the height to something like this. Yeah, it's pretty good. And after you find the height you want, just remember the number and then get back to the normal position, which if we remember, it was 0.05. And after you get the delta, in this case, I found that the good delta is 0.07. And now if we go like that, minus 0.07, then it's a pretty good height. So let's just reset, and I really like how this looks. So let's save. And you should probably actually just reset it right here and make the actual change on the gun itself. So let's save. And then for the last gun, we'll go over and right click on the PW and then like always make a new inherited scene. Then let's just zoom in a little bit. And for this one, we'll just copy all of the muzzle and the sound and just put it back here after we also correct the name. And I just realized that we don't actually need to remove the muzzle material because as you can see, now it's here. And even after we reset the material, it's still there. And the reason for that is that even right here, you can see the meshes do move, but the transform is still in the same position. And when we adjust the position of the muzzle, then it's still in the same position. We don't actually move the mesh itself. You don't have to think of it too much, just go over to the side and correct the position, and that's it. I just stupid for not noticing it before. And now that everything is fine, just select the meshes and again, surface overlay material and just drag the shader right there. Again, put all of the textures. Then let's go over and correct the sound. This one is gonna be reload number 12. And this is a non-automatic weapon, so let's go over and also make an animation player. Again, create a new animation, call it pump with the capital P, set the length to 0.5, then select this part right there. It's gonna be the first one. Keyframe the position. Go to the middle. Move it back a little bit like this. Keyframe again. Go to the end. Select the original keyframe. Control D to duplicate. And now everything is fine. Set the type to cubic. And for this one, we'll also move the trigger because I already know that we can actually see it in the camera. So let's go back to the beginning. And right there, select the trigger. And in the transform, we'll actually keyframe the rotation. Then go over here and right there, just go to rotation and rotate it like this. Yeah, that's about it. Then keyframe. And then at the end, just go over and duplicate the original keyframe. But I actually thought that it will make sense to make the actual trigger a bit faster, so let's move it over to roughly about there. I think it's pretty good. Yeah, like that. And actually, let's put this one around here, so it will be faster than the actual gun. And for this weapon, I didn't really add the pump sound because I don't really think it's necessary, but you can also add it if you want. It's exactly like the shotgun. Then let's go over and make all of the changes after we actually load the script. Right there, let's change the max size to be 12. Set the reload time to something like 1.5. Set the spread to something really accurate like 0.5. Disable auto. Let's also make the recoil much slower like these. I think that these are pretty good values. Then let's set this normal speed to 5 and the aim speed to 3. Maybe even 3.5. And for the height offset, I found that 0.05 is really good. Then we can just save. And again, go to the player, hide the Mach 10, go down, add the weapon. This time the aim pulse was minus 0.055 on the Y, and then minus 0.15 on the Z, and the actual transform was again the 90 on the rotation, and then 0.125 on the X, then minus 0.08 on the Y, and minus 0.17 on the Z, and I think this is pretty good. Now we can save, and we are finally done with all of the weapons. Then click on the camera, and we're going to add a new script, and this is gonna be called camera shake, right there. And after we just select everything and paste this code, which is also not mine, so I'll also link it in the description. But again, this is pretty simple. What it does is just right there. If we disable the preview, it will just randomly rotate the camera on this axis and also this axis like this, so it will kind of look like it's shaking. This is pretty much how all video games make shake in 3D. So let's just save. And as you can see, we have some variables right there. And I also added this little line in the script. You can just pretty much copy it if you want, because it's not in the original script, but it's really simple. And I pretty much left all of the settings on default, apart from the noise. You just need to go over and make a new fast noise light. Set the noise type to simplex. Then go to fractal and set the settings to 4, 20, and 0.8. And now the whole camera shake is good. And now we get into the interesting part where we go over to the player and add a script. Just call it player. And like usual, we just select everything and paste this code which I made. And for the ones who watch the GTA series, yes, this is pretty much the same code as the player in the GTA series, but just a bit different. Right here, we have all of the functions and of course all of the variables right here. And we have the simple like speed variable, then the look sensitivity and the FOV, which we'll touch in a second. But here we also have things like camera tilt, weapon sway, weapon rotation, also a little setting, then head bob in a bunch of situations. Then you have the idle sway when the weapon a bit moves like in the air when you don't actually move. Then with the usual things, the gravity, the camera holder, and in this case also the weapon holder and the camera aim, which we'll also get to it in a second. And then the current weapon that we are using and the weapon index of that weapon. And then the amount of weapons that we have. And also the crosshairs right here, as you can see. And then with the default position of the weapon holder and the mouse input and also time, which we'll also get to soon. Then as you can see at the start, I'll just set the mouse mode to be captured so we can see it and it's locked in the center. This is pretty standard for FPS games. Then I just set the default position of the weapon holder to. And for every single weapon, I just set the player variable to be the actual variable, so self. And as you can see right here in the gun, we have the player. And the one thing that we use it for is to call the recall function on the player, which we'll see in a second too. So let's just save. And then I also call the switch weapon function. This is mainly so we actually use the weapon that we're supposed to use because as you can see, the current weapon is the pistol and we're actually supposed to start with the AK-47 in this case. And maybe you have like multiple weapons switched on at the same time. So to make sure that you're only using the first one. And if we go down to the switch weapon function, you can see just for every weapon, I set the visibility on it to be true only if it's actually the weapon index that we are currently on. The same thing goes for the crosshairs. Then I set the process mode on it to disable or enable it if it's the current weapon. Then I set the actual current weapon and also update the ammo in it so we can actually see the amount before we start shooting. And if we're currently aiming, then we just snap the position to the aim position of the gun. And if not, then it's in the default position because maybe you were aiming the gun and then you switch to another gun. So we will need to make sure that the gun doesn't start in the default position, instead directly in the aim position. This is just a little thing, you don't really have to realize exactly what it does. And before we get back, you can also see here, this is just the usual input function. I just check for mouse motion, and if it is, then I just rotate the player and then also the camera holder, normal stuff relative to the mouse movement to like have the all like looking around and everything, and also clamp the values. But in this case, I also have this little variable for the look sensitivity, which will also adjust to correct itself maybe to the look sensitivity on the actual gun. Because if you're currently aiming, then you have like a lower sensitivity. This is to make sure that you're more accurate when you're aiming. So we do it right here. And you can see I also have this little mouse input, and I just set this variable to be the actual relative event of the mouse movement, and I also just clamp it in the weapon sway amount. This is because that when we sway the weapon from side to side, we actually do it by the amount of movement that we have with the mouse. But we also need to clamp it so it won't be weird. So the more you move with the mouse, then the more the guns wave around and all of that. So these two functions are pretty simple. Then we have the recoil function right here. As you can see, I just take the amount, then the camera shake, and the Z position. These are all variables that you can see right here in the gun. I just pass them right here when I actually need the player. So I have like the aim recoil, then the camera shake, and the Z position. And this is really interesting because what it does, the Z position just makes sure that, let's say that you shot. So let's go over to the camera and preview it. Then you can see the gun is here. And what it does is just go over and take the gun and just move it back a little bit like this. Okay, so originate was here, and I just take it to here. You can see like this. You have like the little recoil effect like that. So this is what it does with the Z. And as you can see, we have a bit less recoil on the Z when we're aiming. It kind of makes sense. If you're aiming, then you're holding it a bit more stable, so it won't move back as much. And then just the usual camera shake, which we have right here. You can see. And then the normal and the aim recoil. And these are on vector 2, so you can actually control the recoil on both the horizontal and vertical axes. And we also have one for the normal and the aim because you want to have a bit less recoil when you're aiming. So this is all of the inputs I get in this function. Then I just set the actual camera shake on the camera. And as you can see right here, I have two variables for both axes of the recoil. And right here, I just take the amount on the Y and directly set it as a degree. But only for the horizontal recoil, I actually use a random range from minus the amount and plus the amount. This is because I want to have like some kind of random recoil, but the gun always recoils up, but not necessarily left or right. So this is what I do with this random range. And then I just straight up rotate the weapon by those amounts. Then I also rotate the player a little bit and also the camera. I just lower the amount by a little. Right here you can see I don't really change the Y rotation much, but the X rotation I do make it a bit lower because I do want the player to like move around from the gun, but I also want to make the camera jump up a little bit because we do kind of want to simulate the whole body moving up because of the recoil. So this is why we have this little part. And of course, we make sure to clamp the actual rotation, like in the input function. And as you can see right here, I just set the position of the current weapon to be the Z position, which I pass right here. This is like the actual part when we move the weapon, back like this. So I don't actually make the change on the weapon itself. It actually happens here and then on the weapon. It's not that important. This is just how we made it up. And this is all for the recall function. And now we finally get to the physics process function. As you can see right here, I start by just checking if the weapon is currently aiming. If it is, then I set the speed to the weapon aim speed. Otherwise, it will be the normal speed. And then, normally just get the input actions of the, W, S, and D, normalize them, multiply by the speed, set the velocity, all of that. Pretty simple stuff. And for this controller, I didn't actually add the jump action. This is because I don't think the map really needs any jump action. As you can see, doesn't really quite make sense to jump over anything. And sometimes not adding jump is actually a pretty good solution because if you just think for a bit, you can see maybe this is a bit too low and the player can just jump on it and then go over and maybe stand on this little trash can and then maybe just completely avoid all of the zombies. So make sure that if you want to add some kind of feature that it doesn't just straight up break the game. But you'll still go down. As you can see, if you're not on the floor, you still go down with the gravity. This is to make sure that if you go from like, you can still go down from something. So like this little ledge right here, you go down, you don't just float in the air right there. And by the way, right now you won't be able to really go over the edge right here. This is because if you go back to the player and click on the player itself, you can see right there in the flow, we need to actually change the max angle to 60 and then save. This is because angles like this are a bit too steep, and even though it's just a little step, the character might not be able to even go up on it. So I found that setting this angle to 60 solves the problem. Then move and slide to actually apply the velocity and all of that. And then right here, these are all just really complex calculations, like sign and all of that. This is not actually mine. I copied it from some kind of video. And I'll also link it in the description. This entire part, as you can see right here. What it does is just like a sine wave is very much like a wave that looks like this, sort of like a wave in the ocean or something. And it's sort of like a very wavy motion. So it's gonna make sense for a sway. So here you can see I have a little sine function right here, and then another one which is a bit different for the x and y. And then according to that idle sway, and also the actual sway if we're currently moving the mouse, then you can see I rotate the weapon holder and also the camera just like that. You can see according to the weapon rotation amount and also the input and a bunch of variables right there. You can see right here, this one is for the rotation on the Y and on the X. This is for the actual sway, and it rotates by the actual input of the mouse right here on both axes, and also adds the idle sway from the sine. And right here, this is where I just add the actual camera tilt and also the weapon tilt. So, when you move to the side, then the weapon will sort of go. You can see if I select the weapon holder, and in the transform, I just rotate the Z by a little bit like this. You can see even just a little angle, maybe something like -1. Okay, maybe -5. You can see this very simple little angle just makes everything a bit more clear of like the movement. Also 5 looks pretty nice. And the same also goes for the camera right there. You can see going to the transform and rotate it to something like 10 or whatever. You can see makes the side movements more impactful. So this is what I do right here. And this is determined by the actual input of the player. And of course, you have the amount and all of that. Then right here, I have this little height offset variable. This is mainly for like the reload, because if we are currently reloading, we want the gun to move a bit slower. So this is for that. And by default, it will be 0 because we don't really have much offset. But if we are currently reloading, then you can see it sets to the weapon height offset. And right there, you can see if you're currently aiming, then we set the position to the weapon aim position right there. And also set the FOV to be the FOV divided by the zoom. Because if we just click on a weapon right here, you can see on the AK-47, the zoom right there is 1.5. And what it does is if we go back to the 3D scene and preview the camera, and let's say that I just add a little right here, just add another mesh right there. Let's make it to be a cube and then just move it over on the Z to something like this. You can see that if I go over to the camera and play around with the FOV, the lower the FOV, then the more zoom we have. This is pretty much how zoom works in FPS games. So let's say on this gun we have 1.5 on the zoom, then we just take 75 divided by 1.5, and that's the zoom that we have when we are aiming, and you'll see it pretty soon. But for now, let's just get rid of this cube and get back to the script. And of course, if we are not aiming, then we just use the normal amounts and the normal FOV. And this is for the rotation. This is to make sure that while we are swaying from like left and right when we are tilting the weapon, then it will also get back to the same position at some point. And the same goes for the Y, like we are always moving the weapon on the sides for like the horizontal recoil. So we make sure to get it back to 90. You might need to set it to 0. In this case, I set it to 90 because all of my weapons are rotated like this. Then right here, I check if the velocity is completely 0, so nothing on it, and I'm not currently on the floor. Then that means that I'm not moving at all. And in this case, I set the head bob to be the idle head bob. Otherwise, it will be the walk head bob. And if we are currently aiming, then we have like the little aim bob amount, as you can see. You might also want to add it as a different variable for every single weapon. In this case, I didn't really think it makes too much of a difference to add it to every single weapon. So the head bob is the same for all weapons. But again, when you're aiming, then it's a bit lower. And of course, you can adjust it too if you want. And this is where we are actually having the weapon bob in this case. We again just use a sine function right here with a little different function for every single axis. And it's pretty much exactly like the idle bob, but in this case it also makes sure to follow the default weapon holder position and all of that because this is not on the weapon. It's only on the weapon holder. And as you can see right here, it's actually on the rotation and this time it's on the position. So not only the rotation of the gun is adjusted in real time, also the position. So this is pretty complex. Then right here you can see if the camera aim is currently colliding, then we make sure to make the muzzle of the current weapon to look at the point that we're actually aiming at. So what the hell does this do? And this is the part that I said that I'll go back to. If you remember right here, let's get out of preview. You can see I have the raycast right here under the camera. And I added this little part. This is to make sure that, like if we get back to the camera, you can see maybe here it looks like the weapon is sort of looking straight into the middle of the screen. But in the actual world, it's just facing completely straight. So this is just an optical illusion. And instead of trying to adjust the actual angle of the weapon, what we do is to just have this little raycast. And as long as we're actually looking at something that we can hit, then we just get the point. You can see like, let's say I hit something there, then I just get the point. And right there on the weapon, I just take the muzzle and just rotate it to face the actual point that we hit. Because all of the shots get out of the muzzle, so if you adjust the angle of the muzzle, then also all of the shots will actually adjust to face the actual point that you're aiming at. Just a simple calculation, you don't really have to think much about it. It will just work no matter what, and you don't have to configure anything on it. And I forgot that if we're not actually hitting anything, then we don't have to do anything. So let's just delete this little line. And right here, it's next to the end of the function. You can see if I'm not currently shooting and I'm not reloading, then you can see I check if I had just pressed the next weapon action. And this is just the mouse up and down, you know, like with the scroll wheel. And this is just to make sure that I'm actually going through the weapons with the scroll wheel, and also make sure to loop between them. Like if I get to the last one and I try to go up by one, then I loop over to the first one. And if I'm on the first one and try to go down, then I will get to the last one. Pretty simple stuff. This is just these two if functions right here. And also make sure to switch weapon at the end to actually update the weapon that we're currently using. So this is some pretty simple stuff. Then right here you can see I set the current weapon aiming variable to be if I'm currently aiming at all with the aiming action, and that I'm currently not reloading, because if you're reloading, then there is no point to aim. And we don't want the gun to like be somewhere in the middle. We want it to be in the default position, just slightly lower. So this is why I have this. Then some pretty simple stuff. If I pressed on reload, then reload. If I started shooting, shoot. If I stop shooting, stop shooting. I don't think I need to explain this part. And now that we are finally done, we can actually add the input actions. So let's go over to the 3D scene and in the project settings, let's put it in the middle. And in the input actions, we have some actions that we need to add. First one is move underscore left, move right, forward, backward, and then with aim and shoot. And of course, reload, just like that. Then for reload, I'm going to use R. For shoot, I'm going to use the left mouse button. For aim, I'm going to use right mouse button. And then you know the usual W, A, S, and D, all of that. Simple stuff. And of course, you can add the arrows and everything you want. You can also just use completely different input actions if you want, but I just really like these ones. And then we can close. And now we can finally open the word and put the player in the scene, the actual player, not the script. And as you can see the player, because we need to actually enable gizmos. And now that we can see the player, we can sort of position him. I'll just go over and completely reset the position. I think that the default position is actually pretty good, but it's a bit on a ledge right here, so let's move it a bit here. And yeah, that's the point where the player starts, so just save and make sure to not put it inside of there. So let's cut and just go up in a second and put in the actual word and not the gas station. And now we can finally save and run the game and hope that everything works fine. And it didn't. And of course it didn't, because I call it weapons holder instead of weapon holder. Hooray. Okay, just save again and try to run. And I also forgot to add the noise. So let's go over to the player. And right there, I actually use all of the default settings. But right here, you see, we again have the noise. So another fast noise light. And for this one, we don't even have to adjust anything. So just try to run again. And finally, this time, everything works. But as you can see, it's a pretty tiny window. So let's get out for a second. And we also have a bunch of errors because we didn't add the next and previous weapon. Okay, so back in the input actions, next weapon and previous weapon, like that. And if we just try to add it, then you can see we can just scroll up and down. Oh, wait, it worked. Last time it didn't work. Great, okay, so just scroll up and down and that's it. And right there, just scroll down. Oh, so I need to do it here. Okay, this is why. Great. So just make sure that you're doing it while you're hovering over here and not here, because then it won't work. Here it works. And right there, we have the input actions. And in order to make the screen bigger, Then we need to go here to general, and in the window, I just set the mode to be on full screen. Make sure that if you're trying to debug anything that you're not on full screen, because then you won't be able to really see anything. But for now, it's much easier to use. And I'll also just enable the stretch mode to be on the canvas items and set the aspect to expand. This is to make sure that the UI scales accordingly. And now we can finally close and play the game. And right there we have this very nice weapon that we can just go around and it will sway like this. And it will also move when we are not doing anything. And we can again just look around, not too far up, and just go around like this, and the weapon will move nicely like that in all directions, and will also tilt a little bit to the sides if you can see it. And if we try to get close to anything, we can also just go up and down this ledge right here, and it won't get stuck inside of walls, which is really nice. And let's actually shoot the weapons. So right there, everything works fine. And the collision here doesn't really work, but it did show up there. And I'm out of bullets, if you can see right there in the up right corner. And we also heard the gun empty action right there. Sound. Okay, so let's reload. You can see it goes down there, but we can still move. And then it's done, and the bullets are back there. And now we can shoot again, and we have a bunch of bullet holes like this. And let's say that I just don't feel like reloading, so away I can just go up and use this shotgun. So, really cool. So let's shoot. You heard? I just reload. Yeah, this is really cool. But as you can hear, yeah, let's just finish it, and you can see when I try to shoot quickly, the sound doesn't really quite catch up, so we'll fix it in a second. And right there, this is the Mark 10, which we might want to push forward a little bit, but it's still pretty good. And let's just try to shoot. And this thing is completely pissed. So let's just try to shoot something. And yeah, and you saw we have a bunch of random movements like this, and it also goes up. So it's pretty cool. And you can see the bobbing and all of that does work. All of the tilts doesn't matter the weapon. And also you can see the actual crosshairs do change between the weapons. And let's also just try to use the gun. And you can see the pistol, actually the pistol. And we can just shoot. And it will go back like this. You can see the reload animation. Yeah, pretty nice. And now it's done, so let's just quickly reload it. And you can see it's back in action. And we didn't even touch the part of like aiming, so as you can see, I'm currently moving pretty fast. But if I try to aim, then you can see I have this little zoom right there, and it's really smooth. And the gun moves to the middle. And now we can just go around, and it will be a bit slower like that. But it looks pretty nice, and it doesn't sway around as much. And I can also look around much more precisely. You can see I just straight up aim on this ice sign. And if I'm not, then it's kinda hard because of the sensitivity. So yeah, this is some really cool stuff. And now we can finally aim and shoot at this thing, which you'll probably have to mess around with the collisions because at some points the bullet holes just won't show up, but on most things they should still show up like this. Let's also get back to the AK-47 and reload it because I completely wrecked it last time. And let's just shoot at the fucking thing. Yep, and we didn't even talk about the muzzle. You can see right there. It doesn't glitch out like that. It works. Okay, and as you can see, I can't go past the walls and everything. And we have this really nice fog that very much blows out my vision, but I can still see. And it doesn't look too weird over there, you can see. And I can go past here because there is the invisible wall. but it still looks pretty good. And yeah, I think this turned out pretty nicely. Let's also switch to the gun so we can go around quicker. And yeah, I really hope that you liked this video and that you enjoyed watching it as always. And let's just get over to the store right there. And we pass the wall and the collision is broken here. Okay, I'll go ahead and fix it. And also we have the shotgun. So let's go ahead and fix them. So for the shotgun, the thing is that if you just try to go ahead and open up the sound right there, this is reload number 7. You can see we have all of this time before it starts. You can see this is pretty long time, 0.28 seconds. And you might just go over and just try to like edit it in some kind of sound software to like cut this entire part. But I think that will just take way too long. So let's instead go ahead and instead of using the OGG format, we'll go over and use the wave format right here, reload 7, and just put it over there. And this time in the pump, we'll use reload 7 from the wave format and just completely delete the OGG. And this time we'll double click it. And as you can see, it's normal, but if we go to import and trim it down and re-import, then click again, then you can see it's a bit quicker right there. You can see it starts at 0.07. So that will fix it and we'll soon see it. And the second thing that we need to fix is right there. Let's go over to the wall right here and try to fix this collision. As you can see, we can't quite catch the collision. Oh, okay, I did manage to catch the collision. Okay, just try again. Click on it. Let's try. Okay, I can click on the collision right there. And then you can see maybe this is the collision. I don't think it is. So let's just go over between all of the collisions and try to get the correct one. You can also just go with the arrows, much simpler. And yeah, this is the collision. As you can see, it's the frame collision. So this is why it was kind of weird. So let's just delete it. And now we can save. Still can't pass the wall. What? And apparently this is one more sneaky collision that we forgot to move. This is the actual door collision. So let's go ahead and rotate it to actually be with the door right there. And now we can finally test the game after last time it didn't work. So let's play. And as you can see, if I change to the shotgun, now the sound comes much quicker and it's good. And if I go all the way over here, then I can pass through the wall and view this entire amazing room. Finally, this episode is done. So yeah, I really hope that you liked this part and that you enjoyed watching it. And as always, this is available for free on my Discord. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.